So now, time to our main event, our general session on assessing the evolution and predicting the impact of AI on human capital management. As we get started, please welcome to the stage the CEO of Brandon Hall Group, Mike Cooke.
Thank you, Claude. Fantastic. So by a show of hands, if this is your first Brandon Hall Group conference, raise them. Just curious. All right, it's a good group. Thank you for being here. You know what I see when I look out in this crowd? I see architects and engineers and builders of human potential. I think that's what we need to think of ourselves as going forward. I believe AI and human talent are catalysts in the greatest workforce transformation in history. And the last time we faced this level of transformation was the Industrial Revolution. But the big difference is that took 100 years. This is happening now just in real time. Change is happening so rapidly, it's absolutely amazing. You know, as I was prepping for today's session, I remember being here 2 years ago, and I couldn't help but think how far we've come in such a short time. I had Mike Modden, was Mike here? Hey, Mike. He was former chief learning officer of Litmus. He since decided to be an entrepreneur. Way to choose a stress-free life, Mike. But he was speaking 2 years ago. He was telling us how ChatGPT had amassed 1 million users in 1 month, the fastest adoption of any technology at the time. Now, they have 300 million ChatGPT users, and users of AI worldwide globally, 700 million. Pretty amazing growth. So we know, as it relates to us, AI is changing how we develop and engage talent. Companies, organizations are spending months on leadership development programs in the past. Now they're designing personalized learning journeys for hundreds of leaders simultaneously. Teams that are struggling with retention now have predictive insights into engagement patterns. Companies concerned about future skill gaps now possess clear visibility into emerging needs with automated recommendations for closing them. I believe that the organizations embracing AI today are reimagining what's possible in talent development. And yeah, there's challenges around this like data, privacy, ethical concerns, rapid change, but these aren't roadblocks, they're really opportunities for decisive leadership, and that's where you have to come in. I think the future of your business, all our businesses, really rests on striking a synergy of human and artificial intelligence. AI handles the routine, hopefully freeing us to focus on the revolutionary. And this is our moment to shape how AI transforms the workplace, and hopefully we're here to ensure you have the research and insights to lead this transformation confidently. Now, we're going to explore how to make this a reality. I'd like to call up my amazing panelists. Round of applause, please. Thank you. So, starting with Maria at the end, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go right down the line.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Maria Taylor, Chief Learning Officer for United Airlines. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Hi, David Chestnut. I work with Accenture. I'm responsible for the technology, data, and AI learning needs of our workforce.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I am Dr. Ashwin Mehta. I am the founder of Mehtadology, which is an AI and tech strategy company.
Good morning. My name's Adriana Lange. I'm head of learning for the Verizon Consumer Group.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Jivko Kirov. I lead sales and partner training at HP.
Fantastic. Thank you. You know, in talking to a lot of you the last couple of days, the one thing that was clear with almost everybody universally is not getting too involved with the theory of how to use AI, but actually how. How do we do this? How do we implement? So I'd like to start off asking, can each of you share a specific example of how AI is already enhancing your organization right now within learning?
Okay. So for us, I think of two specific use cases or areas where we really are starting to make a difference with AI. One is the actual learning development process. I think that is really changing with AI. We have an opportunity to speed the development of learning assets. We also have an opportunity to potentially change some of the roles. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Potentially learning architect, the role of a learning architect, maybe it's evolving. Let's debate. The second area is, and it's something that was talked about yesterday quite extensively actually, was AI coaching and mentoring, and the role of AI in that process. I think AI is allowing us to provide, for lack of better words, kind of a safe place. People feel safer if there is a AI component there instead of a human being. Of course, we need to make sure that the data is secured. People will feel very comfortable doing these exercises with AI if they're sure that their data is safe, right? So that would be the I think just a caution mark, right? We need to be very, very careful about data privacy. But those are the two areas that we are seriously looking into. Yeah.
Thank you. Adriana?
Yeah, I think I would call out three. Some are similar. So the first one is instructional design. I would bet many people in this room are using AI and generative AI around instructional design. The second piece, which was a real win for us, was in role plays. We talked a little bit about role plays yesterday, how much everybody loves role plays, but they're important and they allow our learners to practice. And when you need to scale at the rate that Verizon needs to scale, we train hundreds of thousands of new hires in our BPO space every year. And to do role plays with that amount of people requires armies that we no longer have. And so when we dipped into this area of using AI and bots to do the role plays, it really was an unlock for us to allow us to not only scale the amount that we could do, but also to get all the feedback from those. When you do a role play with a person, you don't get much feedback. But when you do it with AI, all of that information comes right back to you, and you can use it to continue to improve your programs.
Great, thank you. Dr. Mehta?
Yeah, I'll answer this from a slightly different angle because I work with organizations who are changing their L&D landscape with AI. And I also have AI in my business, which I use for servicing those client needs. So if I answer it with that lens, now we have, of course, the content platform data kind of paradigm, which probably everybody's familiar with, that is what L&D has historically been. So whether we're applying SaaS tools to making content more effectively, more quickly, reducing the cost base of that. So there's that application where we're bringing in tools and making content slightly differently. There's also the platform side of things where we're implementing slightly different platform ecosystems for clients to try and maximize the use of AI, talk about getting information into the hands of learners more effectively, more intelligently. So it's an access kind of problem. And that could be building systems, it could be implementing platforms. But the third part of it is really about how do we orchestrate the organization to maximize human AI synergy. And that is a slightly different way to conceptualize how L&D can be implementing AI. But for my business, I also use it I use lots of AI agents to do different tasks, different activities, different things that would otherwise mean I would have to increase headcount by a lot. And there are implications in that, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
So similar to what Ash was saying, we use AI, we've been using it for years within Accenture. I mean, as a professional services company, ultimately what we sell is the time and experience of very smart people. And finding how to quickly pivot skills, quickly rotate skills, identify gaps of things that we need people smarter about, things that we need to maybe skills that we see in decline. We've had AI at the heart of our skills engine for years. Generative AI has kind of only accelerated that for us, but the ability to save that time and away from clients, away from work, to be able to say I can take someone who's halfway there with approximate skill versus someone from 0 to hero. So that's the way AI has continued to change things for us.
Thank you.
Excellent. I will take a slightly different approach and give a little bit of context. United Airlines has 4,500 flights per day, and we service around 500,000 customers per day. It's a business where moments matter, and we're embedding into our operational systems to find ways to shorten time. One of our current pilots is something called Sky Support, where information from our standard operating procedures, our policies, our training are being combined to provide answers in the minute for real customer situations for our contact centers, our crew, and our service centers. How does that relate to training? That's obviously training in the minute on the job, but it also makes us think differently about how we train our people to make better decisions, to interpret the information, and to speed their response.
Great, thank you. Next question. So how are you leveraging AI to identify critical future skills and develop programs to upskill and reskill your workforce at scale?
I think the question about personalization is an interesting one because what personally I'm seeing right now is there is a tremendous potential for personalization at the point of design, but not so much at the actual point of delivery, not yet, at least. Taking a bit of a growth mindset, not yet, right? But I think it's coming. Maybe David can educate us a little bit on that, but I think at the moment, you know, a good learning architect leveraging a private LLM can really, you know, personalize the experiences. The other area that I think there is a lot of potential is AI-driven assessments. AI-driven assessments can really identify skills gap at a lot more granular level than, you know, the traditional type of assessments. Granular level in terms of, you know, within a skill, you know, a specific area. And then for, you know, in my space, for salespeople, that means, you know, really focusing on persona and situation-based training. You know, gets you to the, you know, to the level of that you really need to focus on. So that's what I would say about personalization. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would go back to the example that I was presenting in the beginning in terms of enabling at scale and how it's enabling personalization. So back to the example where you're doing a role play with a bot, all that information is captured. It's captured at a personal level. And so now the trainer or the instructor or the leader can see where each person is struggling or not struggling, and then we can follow up with learning tailored to that person to help them. We can also look at it at a grander scale to say, okay, is our instructional design meeting the mark or is it not meeting the mark? And so I think it really allows us to do that in a really wonderful way.
How long have you been doing that for at Verizon?
We've been doing this for about a year and a half.
Okay.
I would say that, you know, to all the points being made, AI is evolving so quickly. We started with a previous version of AI, if you will, which was harder to use and train. And as generative AI is really coming to the forefront, it's becoming easier and easier.
Great, thank you.
I think on the points of personalization, I have possibly a very contrary and radical opinion on this, and that is that if we move away from L&D just for a second and think about social media, we all know that social media companies have lots and lots of data on us. They can take a very targeted and personalized approach because of the volume of data that they hold about how we behave, what we interact with, what we like, how we comment, what our semantics are, how we use sentiment when we're engaging with the rest of social media. That enables personalization, and that's a data capability. Now, when we look at our traditional L&D paradigm, which I just said was content platforms and data, we have LMSs, we tend to rely on SCORM level data, so that is time-stamped completion data, maybe some assessment data, but do we really get to the granularity of how people answer questions? Maybe, maybe not, depending on what data specification you're using. So that poses a doubt in my mind that we can ever talk about personalization in L&D. We can talk about customization, so by geography, by role, maybe by some rudimentary assessment data that we have, we can start to build not only one artifact of content, but we can iterate that and do it in different languages and maybe have slightly different scenarios. But that requires us to leverage AI to maybe scale that approach. But is that really personalization? Because do we really have that level of personal data in our organizations about the behavior of our workforce? And that also touches on things like predictive analytics and how we predict the behaviors that the workforce is going to be using. So I have a doubt in my mind that we're actually capable of doing that with the technology and data stacks that we have. But customization, I think, is possible as we start to iterate around the content platform space.
Great.
So I'm going to go slightly different and focus on your future skills part of your question, which is a little more around how are we looking at what's coming next and how are we sort of using AI to see around the corner a bit. Obviously, again, as I said, we sell and we look for the time of people in particular disciplines, particular skills. So what we do is we use AI to look at demand data from opportunities in our sales pipeline, the skills associated with those type of implementations. We look at what we see our ecosystem partners, the 350 plus ecosystem technology companies that we work with, what are they releasing? And we actually have an actual competency architecture team who manages that skill list for us. AI has now allowed us to go, okay, hey, we're seeing a trend up in this area. This isn't Gen AI, this is just good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, machine learning to run this algorithm that predictively says, hey, you better start training people in X right now because your demand's gonna run out before it knows it's gonna take us 6 months to make someone an expert, and I've got demand that's coming in 4 months, bells and alarms start going off. And so that's a real way we use that for future skills, but also for current skill needs.
Interesting.
That's very cool. Yep. Our next frontier for our contact centers and crew schedulers is personalized training based on call data. So actually analyzing the data, where calls worked well, what took too much time, and then pushing scenarios to help them get better on places they need more information and more practice.
Thank you. I have a question for the audience. How many of you are just beginning to use AI or haven't used the AI at all yet in your organization? All right, fair number of hands. Maria, if you're just starting out, where would you focus first with AI? What would be the first 1 or 2 priorities for people who are just beginning this journey?
The one that I would suggest is considering some of the LXP platforms, both for technical training and leadership development that you can attach to your learning management system. We have both our Digital Technology Institute and our Leadership Institute that are run on LXP platforms for personalization. I would start there.
Okay. What do you think, David?
When it comes to sort of I'll take it more literal in the what do we do because AI showed up, is our workforce ready? Mm-hmm. We set off on 3 parallel paths right away. Number 1 was educate. We've got to demystify this for people. What is it? What does it do? It's not a magic wand. There is a real cost. There is real actual implication. There's carbon cost where it hurts the planet. And there's reasons to use it, and there's reasons when not to. And that discernment was step 1 for us. Our next 2 pieces of this are really about enabling people with the tools. Gen AI gives you no benefit until there's tools to support it, and you update your processes and your methods to leverage those tools most effectively. So enabling people on approved tools as they come out. And then third state, which we're working on, but is the nirvana, which is we stop sending people to Gen AI training. It's just embedded into our existing touch points.
Right.
We don't take you out, we leave you where you are, and the tools and methods are embedded as you go. So that's how we've been approaching, but start with educate. Get people to understand it's here. Your people are using that at work, whether you want them to or not. You may as well teach them how to use it responsibly.
So you had some change management going on in the first step, is what I'm hearing.
100%.
Right. Well, the one thing I always admire about Accenture is you move very quick for this huge organization. I think that's one of the most impressive things I've seen about Accenture and working with you guys for the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Well, it's working though.
Good.
It's supposed to be hard if everybody could do it.
There you go. Good point.
Where do you start, right? So I would go a step just before what David said, I agree absolutely with the education piece, but we need to be thinking a little bit purposefully about what we're doing. Do we have a problem that we're trying to solve, and is the solution to that problem artificial intelligence? It might not be. There are many problems out there that can be solved in many other different ways. And if we decide that AI is the way to go, it could be a different type of tech, because other tech solutions are available that are not AI capable as well. So let's not ignore all of these other great things that we've got out in the marketplace. But if AI is the solution, then we need to have that kind of understanding of, well, where are we now and where do we need to be? And it could be we need education, we might need to do tech implementation, we might need to do something, whatever those things are that are relevant to your businesses. But I would start very much with just that thought process of what are we trying to achieve? What are the problems that we're trying to solve? And is this particular technology the best fit for those problems?
Thank you.
I agree with everything that's been said before. I think to get really tactical, if you're not using it already, instructional design is a great place to start. It allows your instructional design teams to deliver certainly faster and maybe better than they were doing before. I don't know about your clients and stakeholders, but I can tell you, I have a never-ending list of things they'd like from us. And I don't have enough people to deliver those things. So using AI as our buddy, as our pal, as our coworker, has really enabled us to do a lot more than we could do before.
Thank you.
Well, I have 4 smart people already, basically telling you where to start. But what I would say is, don't just jump in it before you have a clear strategy and idea, what you're trying to actually solve. Because there is a lot of new shiny toys around, right? And don't just go after the new shiny toy immediately. Every system has pretty much every system now in the learning space has some kind of an AI component. Would you go after each one of it? Probably not, right? So have an idea what you, I think, Ashwin, you said it very well. We need to focus on what do we want to solve. And the second thing is focus on education. You need to get the basics. People need to understand what is AI, what is Gen AI, what is, really basic things, CPU, GPU, NPU, for example. I don't know how many of you know the difference, but these are some of the things that we need to educate the workforce before we even, go into implementing AI solutions.
No, that's very well said. Another question for the audience. Are any of you concerned about data privacy or ethical concerns as it relates to AI? Okay. Jivko, do you have any comments on how you address data privacy? And
about the AI concerns about learning?
And data privacy, ethical concerns?
Yeah, I think we have a very strong cybersecurity policies. So, the governance is key here, right? Working with cybersecurity, working with IT. And what is becoming more and more apparent, in my opinion, is that L&D leaders really need to be more educated in AI in order to have a seat at the table. Because otherwise those discussions kind of bypass us and things are done for us instead of us being part of the discussions. But no particular concerns about privacy in the way we do things.
Do you have any guardrails on your AI users and how you want them to use it and how not to use AI?
Absolutely, yeah.
You do, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If I think about privacy and ethical uses of AI, and Verizon's a very big company with a lot of rules, and we are adverse to getting sued. So we have a lot of guidelines about how we can and when we can use AI. I don't think we're alone in that, by the way. And so we have to play within these guidelines, which I think is fair and protects the company. From an ethical perspective, I think all of us as practitioners really have to think about how we train AI, if you will, because there are opportunities for bias, depending on how you're using the AI. I think about recruiting, right? If you're using AI for recruiting, and you tell the bot, hey, this is the perfect person, this is what I'm looking for, is there any bias in there? And if you use that, do you continue to only hire one kind of person? And so I think there's a lot of things that we're going to need to think about as we move forward in our use of AI.
I'm going to sort of split this problem up into some things that we can think about tactically, right? So first part of thinking about data privacy and ethics and this whole governance piece is, how many of you, probably show of hands, let's do this. How many of you are working in an organization where your IT departments are implementing something like Copilot from Microsoft? So quite a few people. Now, in that scenario, probably your IT teams are already working through data flows, where the data is stored, where the servers are, and they're doing some kind of due diligence around what data goes where, how it is stored, how it is handled, how it is processed. Is anybody in L&D actually involved in that discussion, and do they need to be? Probably not. That's a technical discussion that part of your organization is dealing with, and probably you don't need to think about that. Where you do need to start to think about this is in L&D, the shiny toy syndrome. We go, there's a new tool out there, we're going to implement that bit of SaaS, software as a service, and that's going to come into our environment, and we're going to put some company data in there. It's probably not, unless it's a platform, it's probably not going to have large quantities of user data in there. If it is a platform, then it is, and we need to think about that. So we start to then partition out how we should be thinking about data privacy. Because if you're buying a software that uses AI to make cartoons, and you're not putting any company information in there, then it's probably not too much of a problem. When you start putting user data, of course, it starts to become problematic. And L&D folks who are bringing in the new shiny tools need to be thinking about that kind of thing and interfacing with IT teams and all of this. But then when we start to think about ethics, that's a very different discussion. So you bring in, for example, a coaching tool. We've talked about coaching tools, I think, a couple of times yesterday and seen a few. The ethical consideration around that is now we have AI coaching in our organizations, and we used to employ 50 coaches, and now we can employ 10. So we have workforce displacement. We can start to reduce headcount. Is that an ethical thing to do because we have AI in the mix? How does our organization need to look in the future? And how are we impacting the people who are receiving coaching advice, as well as impacting people who have jobs and have had those jobs for many years? So that starts to become an organizational development consideration, and the ethics around that are very different to the ethics around bias in AI models, because those, to some degree, are taken care of by the manufacturers or the service providers of large language models who train those models. So we need to partition the problem and understand, where do we need to play? Where do we just need to understand and be an intelligent customer of something? And where do we need to be satisfied that a supplier is taking care of governance appropriately? So I think there is a multi-structured answer to that question.
Thank you.
I'm going to build on what Ash said, because I think the ethical concerns also become a really important question for your C-suite. And as many of you are, head advisors in that space, you think about, we're at a point, and if it's not there, it's very soon, for a lot of things where these tools will objectively do certain tasks that we thought were uniquely human. Not just they can do them, but they're going to do them objectively better by every metric that we use. There's a line that will be drawn in your organization that will say, these are the things that we're okay to have tools and machines do. These are things that must have a human in the loop, and these are the things that only human beings can do. That line is going to get drawn once and immediately move, and it's going to move constantly with technology, with advances, with changes in legislation, with changes in just the culture and the change tolerance of your organizations. That line is constantly in flux now. So continuing to reevaluate ethically, morally, sustainably, what is that line for my organization, and how do I best, as an HCM provider, advise on that? That's a whole new job that everyone in this room now has, because we have to be the voice of people in that conversation, even the digital ones.
Interesting. Do you think we'll ever have a chief AI officer? I know there's some companies already hiring for chief AI officers, but I think it's an interesting interesting thing going on.
Absolutely. I mean, so our chief A officer is a lady named Lange. She's absolutely one of the smartest human beings I've ever been in close proximity to. And she will ask me questions on human performance, on human capital. She works with Professor Maj Sakar, who's our chief learning officer. She works with our talent and organization. She understands that in order to make AI effective in your organization, it's not in spite of the people, it's through them, it's with them. It's with us along for the ride, and that's why a lot of our AI programs and our technology programs are so successful, because our technology realized that the people are the ones still doing things.
Thank you.
I would layer onto this conversation the cybersecurity and the technology security, which is our foremost concern.
Yeah.
So currently, we're not using any external open systems. Everything's internal, and we have United, GBT. So our roadmap has us not doing anything with external OpenAI until probably 2027, because as practitioners, what it means for us is how do we identify and work with our governance systems to make sure anything that we're bringing in externally is really meeting the qualifications and security qualifications of your own systems.
Thank you. You know, Maria, when I ran into you in the hallway, you wanted me to bring up DeepSeek. Who in the audience has heard of DeepSeek? Well, what's interesting is Monday when I was driving here, there was an announcement that the Chinese had just developed this system that takes 1/10 of the power of, say, ChatGPT, and it's just as fast as ChatGPT and other AI models, but they developed it in 2 months at a cost of $5.8 million. Now, creating large language models typically ranges in cost from $100 million to $1 billion. So that was quite an innovation, and I was driving up here, I was like, my presentation's going to be pretty obsolete by the time I give it. So I was a little bit worried. But thank you for bringing that up, Maria. You have any thoughts on DeepSeek?
Well, back to what I just said, our primary thought will be how secure is the system,
Yeah.
right? And how rigorous will the testing be in order for us to implement it? But then again, we're in a user group, we're not
Right.
in a competitor group, so the competitors may see it differently.
Yes.
Wow, what a week, huh? And as you might imagine, there's a flurry of activity where I work with people trying to mean, what does this mean for not just us, but for our clients?
Yeah.
Because we thought that a large language model, building your own, having your own, was something that really big enterprises would do. That's it. We're still not thoroughly convinced just because you can do it for $5 million or $10 million that it's the right thing to do. But these innovations that are being released as open source, that are out there in the world, we've always said that the open source models, even the ones that are, open source TM, where you pay a monthly subscription for, even though they're called open source, those big models are still really good. We can use them living at that software layer, that implementation layer, the what problem are you trying to solve layer. That's always going to make the most sense. So what I think you'll see is that this is a continuation of a technology innovation that is going to start popping up all over the world as more things are shared, as more of this technology becomes, I don't want to say the knowledge becomes commoditized, but the knowledge becomes freely available. You're going to see those sort of barriers continue to come down. This is a spike we've seen across a lot of technologies, but to Mike's point, never faster, never at breakneck speed. I mean, this is the difference between a horse and buggy and a Maserati, and it's very, very different for us.
Thank you.
I have a little bit of skepticism around the cost profile.
I do too.
So if I'm developing a model, I need to buy lots of GPUs, I need to source a lot of data, I need to train that because I'm the first to the market. That's a kind of different situation to I'm in a situation where I'm in a country, they already have a lot of GPUs that are used for other things. We already have a lot of data. I can piggyback on what inventions were happening in the past. And I can then go out to effectively what is happening in the whole market, where we're in a state of perpetual beta with nearly all of our software. Things are released and they're effectively tested with the public. So you don't have to go through that cycle. So would the cost profile be different? Yes, probably, and that's really the big headline. that it was cheaper and quicker to make this model. So to some degree, that seems foreseeable. And it seems that with things like Moore's law, we should expect things to get cheaper or computationally more effective as time goes by. So to some degree, we expect these things to happen. What we're not really expecting is for this to come from somewhere that wasn't effectively Silicon Valley, where all of the other models were released and were publicized. So we have that kind of almost jarring effect where this came from somewhere else. We didn't even see this coming.
No, not at all.
No.
And that's more of a political thing. So we have also, societally, we have this effect of now what's happening in the tech space is also merging a little bit with the political discourse, which becomes very interesting. But when we think tactically about how is this actually going to affect the things that we do day to day, well, we have conversational models, we have data that is company data, we are trying to be secure in how we show our company data to conversational agents such that they can surface it to our workforce. None of that really changes, whether we have O3 mini or we have O4 with advanced reasoning, or we're looking at we're looking at this balance between speed and accuracy, or we're looking at a model that comes from somewhere else. We still have to take that due diligence, and we still have to implement things in a way that suits the risk appetite of your business.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't change that much from a corporate perspective.
I think the innovation is so important. You know, like Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, he's put together 4 teams to figure out how they did it, what's the implications, how do you go about it. Chip stocks and AI stocks crashed on Monday, right, because they thought it was over for NVIDIA. I don't know what they're doing now. But, you know, people thought NVIDIA was like going to be done now. But I really think this is just the beginning, because as you said, David, you know, I was thinking it was just enterprise organizations that would be implementing large language models because it's so expensive and costly to do. But if this is true, you're going to see companies that are in the $50 million range go into this very rapidly, I think. Yeah. I think that's going to be a huge change. I think this AI journey is just really now beginning. Now it begins.
Just to counter that a little bit, most of the people in this room, you tell me if I'm wrong, but you will go through a build versus buy consideration when you're looking at your tech.
Yeah.
So when you go through that build versus buy consideration, you will have that decision to make. Are we going to build something ourselves because the cost and the method of doing it is now no longer prohibitive? And that's a company decision to make. But it starts, as you're right, it starts to become more realistic to think about.
It'll be interesting to see. This just happened 2 days ago, so.
Yeah, I would say from a practitioner's perspective, which is how I'm looking at this, you know, the news of the week really just reinforces for me that this is just all changing so quickly, and that you shouldn't marry yourself to any one technology or any one solution, because by the time you do, it's going to be outdated. So I wouldn't sign long contracts. I would keep my playbook open, and I would keep my eyes open, because, you know, as soon as one thing is the best, the next day, you know, something else is springing up that's just kicking it right off the shelf.
Yes.
I don't know much about DeepSeek, but I hope the stock market recovers.
I just told you all I know.
Because I have a 401k, and you know, so. You know, it really reinforced for me the importance of some of the decisions we have made. I think Maria touched on that. You know, walled in private LLM rather than, you know, open access to ChatGPT and so on. Yes, I understand that's probably for bigger corporations, but you know, I think that's the way to secure things. The other thing that I would mention, there is new AI PCs in the market, just launching, okay? And with AI PCs, you can perform a lot of the tasks on the device. So they're a little bit more pricey, the standard PCs, but it allows, you know, developers, you know, potentially even learning developers to do some of those tasks directly on the device instead of going to the cloud, instead of calling to ChatGPT and so on, right? So, you know, you're talking about a jump in performance with the new NPU architecture, 48 trillion, you know, tasks per second. That's what they go up to. So, you know, it really allows that performance to scale.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. So with all this technology and AI going on, how do you think the role of, say, chief human resource officers or chief learning officers may change in the future?
I think what I would say is the role of some of our learning roles will change. Let me start with that.
Okay.
Like what I see, probably the immediate or the most immediate effect is on learning architects, our traditional learning architects. Maybe they need to become more of a, private LLM architects or prompt architects, people who know what queries to put in the tool and how to extract the best information going forward, instead of, having the traditional task of developing a courseware, right? So let's see it as an opportunity instead of as a challenge and an opportunity for a group like that. In terms of the actual, learning leaders, I'll come back to what I said. I think we need to become a lot more tech savvy, because otherwise, the decisions are made for us.
Yes.
So in order to have that seat at the table, we really need to understand the technology. We need to educate ourselves, in order to really be part of the discussion.
Thank you.
I would say that AI has implications for really all roles within learning development. Instructional design, trainers, learning technology, it's all going to be impacted in a positive way. And of course, the Chief Learning Officer as well. We're going to need to embrace AI. It's going to fuel us, be the wind beneath our wings. But we're going to need to do it in ways that make sense, protect us, are ethical. And to build off what was already said, the Chief Learning Officer is going to have to understand technology and AI at a deep level and be really connected with your CTO and have a seat at that table.
I will pivot slightly to avoid repeating what you just said. But of course, being tech savvy is part of it. But if we think about, earlier I said there's this traditional paradigm of L&D. We make content, we put it on a platform, we get a little bit of data out, and we then are incentivized to make more content. So bigger batches. We can now make 1,000 videos at the click of a button. So let's make those 1,000 videos, and still nobody will look at them. And then we will try and do some kind of engagement as we go out into the workforce. So there's that potential paradigm, which brings us to the point of needing to justify what it is that we're actually doing. And I think one of the things that is foreseeable over the next couple of years is to have that tough conversation with C-suite, with investors, with key stakeholders that says we're investing this money into this department or this many people who are effectively building content, which we know now we can do at the click of a button, where we're looking at a skills architecture and hiring against the skills architecture that we know is changing rapidly, and we're not keeping up with what's happening in the market. So there are these kinds of tough discussions which I think will have to happen with CFOs, for example, when we say, well, L&D is a cost center, how are we justifying how that's bringing value to the bottom line of the business, how we're shifting revenue, how we're shifting share price when we do some of these initiatives. And preparing for that discussion, being armed with the data, being able to talk about the tech, and being able to say, you know what, it's not just that we made another 100 videos last year, but we have changed hearts and minds and skills and revenue, and we know that we impact these things that are the competitive advantage of the business. Unless we're able to have that discussion, then I think there will be huge impact on the L&D workforce and what the jobs are that actually exist in organizations. So I think preparing for that, I think that's foreseeable for me.
So I like thinking about this in terms of what are we as HCM or L&D or HR leaders going to be dealing with that's different in the future. And if not now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you will be leading blended teams. You will be leading teams that are comprised of human workers and digital agents. And your job will be different. It will feel different because Jensen Huang just made a bunch of headlines with saying that IT departments will be the HR for agents, paraphrasing. But that doesn't mean that HCM and HR professionals don't still have a place in the other side of that equation. We can inject those excellent principles that we've learned with human workers. They still apply to digital agents, but getting around the fact of how do I really, we started talking about, it's job task analysis. It's, Jivko and I were having the conversation. It's occupational, it's occupational design. It is all those rethinking. We lived for a long time as L&D specifically at this place between knowledge and skills. Now we've been shifted dramatically to the right. We are between skills and behaviors. We are attempting to change the way people work, and we're being asked for all of our expertise about human beings, about how they work, about how brain science functions. If you're not in those conversations, they're happening. So find out ways to have those conversations in your work, but know that you're going to be leading mixed teams. You're going to have digital workers as a part of your team, sometimes as large parts of your team. Start thinking about how to partition work out and how you work better with those tools as they come online.
Great.
When I think of my role and my team's role, I think of us as learning strategists. And how do we, as learning strategists, provide workers and leaders who can actually lead in the context? So I loved what our opening speaker said about leadership in context. And so it's incumbent on us to think about today and in the future how the work is changing. And as I illustrated, we're using AI to change our operational and internal processes. So the work's changing, the world's changing, the technology's changing, and our people are changing. And it's important to look at all of that in context and to be agile to adapt quickly to the changes.
Jivko, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one additional comment. It was mentioned a little bit yesterday, and it's a really, in my mind, very important concept, something that is really changing. I think AI has a tremendous potential to democratize learning. And by that I mean, just imagine, a very near future, it's not a very distant future, where some of your knowledge workers or even some of your learners can directly create learning assets instead of utilizing our sort of set processes that we currently have. But that poses challenges as well, right? It needs to be governed. And what's the role of the learning organization and the learning architect in that type of situation and that type of architecture, right? It's something to think about, but I think I take it as something that really will help us to change learning, and we need to be at the forefront of that. It's an opportunity.
No, it really is. And I have one more question for all of you, and then we'll take some questions from the audience, but I'll start with you, Jivko. How are you personally using AI to make yourself more productive? Not your team, but you personally.
Yes, I use Copilot quite a lot. I use Copilot to summarize meetings. If I can't attend a meeting, I basically read the notes that Copilot creates. So Copilot is probably for me, it has become my digital buddy, I guess you can say, right? So one specific example.
Yeah, I started
personally for me.
I use Read.ai, and I realize I don't take notes anymore on calls, and then I have to go back.
I noticed that on your calls.
Yeah, that's right.
Read.ai.
Sorry. Adriana?
I'll give you two examples, one that worked and one that didn't work.
Okay.
So day to day, I use AI to help me write emails or meeting minutes or any of that kind of stuff. But from a personal perspective, I tried to use AI recently to plan a vacation for myself. I had hit a brick wall. I was going during spring break. All the hotels I wanted were booked up. So I gave the problem to AI. Here's what I want, blah, 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 blah. So AI came back with me. This is the one that failed. AI came back with me a beautiful agenda, but didn't actually go the next step to book it for me. And I kept trying to make it do that. It just wouldn't do it. And so we aren't there yet, but one day.
We'll work on that for you.
Operator.
I envision that it will actually do it for me.
Did you choose United flights or?
I did tell it I prefer United.
I'll take that back.
Beautiful.
Dr. Mehta.
So, in my business, of course, and personally, I'm using AI in a number of different ways. I use a number of sort of search capabilities, so not necessarily ChatGPT or Copilot. I use things like Perplexity and Cite and the things that have a little bit more accuracy in what they retrieve in terms of search. I also use a lot of AI workflows. So one of my ambitions is that I have a small business with a few people. I want to scale that to a head count of, let's say, 50, argument's sake, just a random number I've just picked, without increasing head count at all, which means I need a lot of agentic support. So I'm building agents for as much as I can that can be done reliably with human approval, of course. And then the far side of it is, of course, building things directly in either Azure or AWS, which are agentic and which have that accuracy, which can be, to some degree, coded into the logic. So there's a spectrum of ways to use it, but I think those are the key.
Yeah, I think
key use
AI
cases.
workflows I'm fascinated by. What tool do you use to develop that for yourself?
The workflows.
The what one? Yeah.
So I do some things in Azure. I use some of the less code platforms like Make or Zapier or U for those kinds of things. And of course, you need to understand the rest of the architecture that goes into it. So things like Airtables and being able to call webhooks and all of that. But it's not a steep learning curve. You can actually get there pretty quickly. So I'd recommend anybody to go and try that out if you can.
Thank you. David.
Oh, Mike, how do I use AI? Let me count the ways, right? So it started very, I mean, I always wanted this world, right? This is, if anybody was in my panel yesterday, we talked about Star Trek, because this is how you interact with computers on Star Trek. You start with asking for a draft, and then you iterate, and you get it a little better, and you change things. You're not looking for a final product. So I started with just, I'm gonna pick one, I'm gonna buy the premium version, and I'm going to use it one time a day for something that I would normally Google, or something that I would normally want to pull up a YouTube video about. How can I just integrate this? So when we talk about preparing the workforce for the future, we talk about these new AI skills. AI workflow integration is something we talk about. How do I break down my processes and find ways to insert these tools to help me do them better, faster, stronger? So that's something I'm working on with myself. I would also say the biggest one for me is, shock to no one who's been in this panel, I'm a yapper. I like to talk things out. I'm an external processor. That's a word I invented for someone who is mouthy. And I externally process. I can do that with co-intelligence now. I can sit down, open up my AI and go, hey, I'm just gonna ramble for 20 minutes. Help me make sense of what I just said. Bing. I hate to tell you, my wife, other amazing human beings that I've worked with in my career have had to fill that role. And now I've got co-intelligence, and they're all really super happy that I found ChatGPT and other things. So, but I'm telling you, just talk it out. Throw on voice, ramble, and let it see what it comes back and what it can add for you.
It's good to know AI can save marriages and relationships.
Yeah, I'm taking that one back.
Close co-working friendships, yes. I get invited to a lot more parties now.
Absolutely. Maria?
Personally, I use the search capability, and I find that it takes me less time, because if I like the answer, then I have the answer. But if not, I can deeply dive quickly into the sources. So that saves a lot of time than trying to go through all of it. Professionally, we've embedded United GBT into our performance management system. So recent year-end reviews and goal setting becomes a lot simpler. And then we're also to research things at work for email or PowerPoints.
Thank you. You know, when we started this, the timer wasn't started. I was like, we're going to be here for a few hours until they start that thing up. But unfortunately, they brought the time back. So we have about 10 minutes to address any questions from the audience. If you have some, that'd be great. I see some hands raised. Thank you, Claude.
A lot of us, I know, like what you just mentioned, we use AI as more of a personal assistant, thought partner kind of thing. But you were mentioning, role plays, and I'm curious, what are you doing when you have these role plays and people are interacting with them and you're getting the feedback? What tools are you using to analyze that data, and how are they providing, how are they looking at that data, and how are they providing the feedback to the learners based off of that? Are you using an LXP? Are you using your internal system? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're using a tool called Zenerate. I didn't mention it before because I don't want to be a walking commercial, but that's the one we've chosen to use. It's been working great for us. And so not only does it incorporate the engine, the AI engine, of course we have to train it. So for example, we train the scenario. The caller is calling about an upgrade. Okay, here are all of our rules. We feed that all into the engine. And then it will do the role play with the person. And there's a dashboard that comes out with all of the stuff to feed back to us, both to the learner, to the trainer, and then to us as the L&D professionals to continue to hone the craft.
Yeah, we use Big Tin Can, used to be known as Brainshark, for AI coaching. Very similar capabilities. Everything is in the system, in the tool. You can export it. We can choose to provide the feedback also to the manager for follow-up, personal sort of, coaching or mentoring activity. But the tool is great. I mean, it gives you are you maintaining eye contact? Are you using the right words? Obviously, you need to structure the activity so there is human input. But we have seen great success with that.
I'll just add one, which is in that scenario. I know Generate. I don't know the other tool. In that scenario, you've got to consider what you're generating a lot of data about how your workforce is working, how they're behaving, and just consider the proposition of giving all of that data to a supplier, who owns that data, how they're going to use that, how you're going to get analysis from that, and it may be something to consider that your data itself sits in your environment, and the supplier's tool can generate the analytics, or you can do it yourself. So I would say just think around those things.
Very true, So this goes via cybersecurity, presumably the same with you, Adriana,
yes,
right?
Completely.
Very strict cybersecurity validation before the tool is implemented. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next question? This gentleman over here in the corner. Ellen.
Great panel. Thanks a lot. Lots of good information. The conversation around having a seat at the table as an L&D practitioner, in our tech space, we're experimenting with AI twinning. What questions should we as L&D practitioners be asking our tech teams when it comes to AI twinning?
I love this question. Thank you. Hey, I'll go first if you guys don't mind, because I was smiling the whole time. So the great secret is you should be asking the same questions when you're doing learning needs analysis for human beings. What do you want them to know, do, and feel differently? So what does that tool need to be able to approximate in order to find out those things? What do they need to show proficiency in? Are we teaching knowledge? Are we teaching skills? Or are we trying to impact behaviors? So it is everything you know to already be true. You're now, because those twins have to be replicas. They have to be understanding of what your workforce, what your constituency does and acts. That's the whole point of digital twins. And so you still show up as that HCM practitioner, that human performance expert that you are. You're now just layering that in because your organizations will make this a tech-only conversation if they can. Many of them probably are. Many of these things are happening in rooms that we're not in. How you get into them in your organization will change, but once you're in the room, I am the voice of the human performance in this loop. That's how you show up.
Great.
The question I ask is, how does it change the experience? Yeah, it's a new tool, it's a new shiny toy, but how does it help to change the learner experience, to improve the learner experience? Is it creating more fragmentation rather than consolidation? Because if we implement various tools with AI components, we risk potential fragmentation of the learning space. So, does it really help us to improve the experience of the learners or not? Are we doing it purely from a technical perspective, or are we doing it to really change the, people's experience?
Good points. We have time for more questions. Ellen, back there.
Yeah, I have one question. Hi, I'm Sanjeev. Thank you very much for those insights. My question is, in the next 2-3 years, life is going to change a lot, and that's what you all have confirmed. As a human resource professional or a learning professional, what are those maybe couple of skills we need to pick up? Not those behaviors which you have touched upon during the conversation, but the skills I'm saying, which will help us stay more relevant and competitive in this world?
I'll start that one. I would say focus on the business outcomes of the things that you do. That's something that's been a challenge in learning and challenge in human capital for many years. It keeps coming up in surveys, it keeps coming up in conferences around how do we think about performance. Because we think about performance through the lens of human performance. And all of the skills that are related to quantifying performance, thinking about return on investment and how you make an impact, how you leverage technology, because technology is part of an operating model, right? So you need to be thinking about the entirety of your operating model and how that operating model leads to impact. And that entire skill set is sometimes, but not always, part of L&D. Because as David touched on earlier, you know, we do things like analysis. We go, there's a learning needs analysis. We're going to figure out what's needed, and then we're going to deploy a content solution against that. Well, there are new types of analysis. We need to think about task fit. We need to think about human hierarchies and how they fit with machine hierarchies and how they work together and what synergy looks like, right? So the basics are probably going to be the same, but the nuances will be different because we still need to do analysis. We still need to deploy a solution that has a performance impact. But how do we do the analysis? How do we then deploy an intervention rather than a solution? Because it could be either. And how do we ensure that impact and validate that in the data and be able to tell that data story? Some of these skills you might already have. Some of these skills you might need to build on. But I think the fundamentals are going to be the same.
I would add to that, be good innovation leaders, so be very focused on opportunity identification, user-centered design, and design thinking, because the human has to be at the center of everything.
I mean, just building on that, I think it's focus on the things that humans still can uniquely do. There are things that we will always be better at. And those things are going to become more and more important. As the machines get more human, we have to kind of continue to outpace that. And so if you think about things like creativity, storytelling, intuition, those things that are skills that are sort of innate about being a human being, those don't go away. So what are the skills you wrap around those things to make us better at interacting with these machines? I think that is when you talk about staying relevant, that's the thing that first springs to mind to me is how do I make my sort of uniquely human gifts shine more with the technologies just to help support it.
Right, thank you.
I would add to that something we haven't touched upon yet is the change management aspect here. There are a lot of people out there that are still afraid of AI or just don't understand, and they're afraid that AI is going to take their job. And so how do we, as professionals and practitioners, change that mind frame to be, no, it's not going to take your job, it's going to help you. We can't possibly harness the power of AI if we're afraid of it.
Right. Yeah. I think we have time for one more quick question. I saw you
I would
back
just
there.
add two things.
Go ahead.
Intellectual curiosity and compassion.
Yep.
I think to 100%. Me, that's what we need going forward. We need to be curious about what's coming. We need to be compassionate about people's concerns and fears.
It's very important. Thank you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you. My name is Arthur. I have a question/reflection actually related to the bias. I partner very closely with our digital team, and I've realized that actually there are only male colleagues. And don't get me wrong, I like them a lot. The question is, to what extent we intrinsically, unintentionally are embedding the bias into the AI solutions by not having diverse enough teams, and to what extent we can actually reduce this bias at the later stages of the design and development of the AI solution.
Who wants to take that?
I'm glad we saved the easiest one for last.
I'm talking
Good question.
too much. Go, Ash, go.
I'll stop, but with the caveat that this is a long conversation, right?
Yeah.
So you're right to the extent that when we develop tech, we tend to test that tech, or train and test on data sets and cohorts that we're familiar with. So things that tend to come out of Silicon Valley tend to be tested and trained with white male engineers. That's a problem that has been flagged multiple times and is well known in that sector. So you have that acknowledgement of bias. Then when you move forward, you have with every technological solution, we can talk about machine learning or we can talk about natural language processing as well, we have the opportunity to correct for that bias in the mathematical model, as well as how we deploy and how we make our users more educated around what that bias is and how they correct for it at that point. So very high level, all of these things need to be considered when we think about the chain of bias correction, and acknowledging that source at the start is an important way to do that. The diversity of teams, of course, would need to be threaded through the entirety of the chain that I've just mentioned, if you really wanted to correct for it at source, and then make sure you have that sort of correction thread going all the way through. So it's a very long conversation, but we can chat about it at any point.
Absolutely, I think that'll be great. And our time is sadly ended, but thank you. All five of you just truly personify excellence, and you're incredibly sharing. It just can't give you enough appreciation. Thank you.